So after the destroyed Jewish ghetto in April 1943, Auschwitz, the Warsaw Ghetto became an Auschwitz satellite camp, a labor satellite camp called Gensha because it was based on Gensha Street. So the first group that built the camp of Auschwitz workers on the destroyed Warsaw Ghetto site were sent in August 1943. There were about 500 of them. The second group of Salonikans from Auschwitz that came to strengthen and continue the operations were another 500 Jews from Salonika and Auschwitz who came in October 1943. So they built the barracks, and they also cleaned up the rubble from the destroyed ghetto, and that was their routine. Much easier than in Auschwitz, but you had problems. It still was malnutrition, it still was difficult. The Jews had typhus, they had illnesses, they were weak, they were frail, they were small, they were thin. But in Warsaw they found a lot of spoils, they found a lot of money, they would trade with the Polish workers who worked in the camp. They even established contacts with the underground. Sometimes they found Jews who'd survived the Warsaw Ghetto and were hiding in bunkers in the Warsaw Ghetto. But in general, they had it good. Of course, they wore the striped uniforms. But after about a year, there were hardly any Salonikans left. And then as a workforce, the Germans needed more people, so they brought German Jews, they brought Hungarian Jews. There were still a few hundred Salonican Jews left, but the masses had already withered away. Now, of the weak Jews, let's say by July 1944, there were about 300 of them in a group. The Germans just massacred them. The biggest group they decided to take out of the Warsaw Ghetto camp, and they took them on a death march toward Dachau. To eventually, they would go walk 30 kilometers a day, and of course, the people who died on the way, and then they were killed by bombings by the Allies. They ended up in a place called Mildorf and Waldlager, in satellite camps at Dachau. There were all sorts of incidents, but most of them survived. And then they made it to Tel Aviv. Those in the Warsaw Ghetto who stayed there were a few hundred. So there were still the inmates until the end of July 1944 in the Warsaw Ghetto camp, plus about 400 Jewish prisoners in the the Pawiak prison, which was also a prison connected to the Auschwitz. At the last day of July, all the main group of prisoners leave, and you have a small amount. On August 1st, 1944, the first Polish resistance revolt starts. So there were two brothers from Salonika. One was Dario Levi, and the other was Alberto Levi. So on the 5th of August, 1944, Dario noticed that there was, on the other side of the fence, there was a German tank that these partisans had taken over. But they didn't know how to operate the tank. They didn't know how to shoot the cannon on the tank, and they didn't have any ammunition. So he moseyed over and asked what's going on. He was a sergeant in the Greek Tank Corps, had fought in Albania, and they said they don't know how to operate the tank, plus they have no tank shells. So he wandered through Warsaw and found in abandoned or overtaken German arsenals, he found 2 tank shells. So he went back and he shot the 2 tank shells at the Pawiak prison, and that liberated the Jewish prisoners. So the fighting took a while, and there was one group of Salonikans that escaped from the ghetto area in the sewers. In the meantime, there had been other Jews and Salonikans who had escaped, and they had a lot of interesting escapades before the revolt, the first revolt. In the revolt, it was mass pandemonium, and there was shooting from both sides. There were Greek Jews and other Polish resistance fighters, of course, that died in the crossfire. There were people taken prisoner again by the Germans, and everyone was on his own. There were small groups of Greeks, and they survived. So Dario and his brother Alberto were always together. Alberto had escaped death 11 times. He was a very tough guy. Very nice guy, but very tough physically. And so he became a officer in the AK, in the communist anti-Semitic movement. And one time he had an affair with a woman and was put on trial, but he got off of it because the head of the AK was actually Jewish and had, sympathy for him. But Dario and then there was the second revolt, which Dario and Alberto and some of the other Greek Jews participated. And then afterward, Dario and Alberto did sabotage of German installations in the countryside in Poland, in about a radius of about 100 kilometers from Warsaw. So they were real heroes. Unfortunately, until today, Poland and the Pawiak prison don't want to commemorate Dario's role. Unfortunately, Dario didn't talk a lot. He was emotionally shocked by the Holocaust. Alberto talked. But because Dario didn't talk, he wasn't well recognized. And only toward the end of his life, when I wrote about him and he gave a testimony at Yad Vashem, did things start to become public. Now, after the second revolt, Dario and Alberto stumbled upon a bunker on the site of the Warsaw Ghetto where there were a lot of Jews. They had also stumbled, when they were prisoners in Genshe, on a bunker, and the people invited them to come in, and they came back later in the day for Yom Kippur Kol Nidre service. So when Dario and Alberto went to this bunker, a different bunker, after the second revolt, they found a whole group of Jews that had held out in Warsaw for a long, long time. And there was a woman and her brother and her cousin who originally were in that Yom Kippur service in the first bunker. So Alberto had an affair with this woman, and but after the Holocaust they departed ways. Alberto went to Israel, and the woman went to England. And after the woman died, in England, her daughter found in the attic her letters in Yiddish and love letters that they had sent each other. And putting two and two together, when she came to me, we put the whole story. There's still more to tell, but these Salonican Jews did many things in the Warsaw Ghetto. There were many other people. They had other feats. It isn't all resistance, but it was interesting. They wheeled and dealed. They hustled, and they were witness to many things. One Salonican found a father and a son, were still hiding in a bunker in the Warsaw Ghetto, and this was just the tip of the iceberg of what had remained after the revolt. So in the first and second revolt, not only did you have the Polish resistance, but you had all these Jews who had survived the regular Warsaw Ghetto revolts and were involved, and we still don't understand the relation between all these peoples and what they did, but the Salonican Jews and the Sephardic Jews were part of the picture.